Today, I would like to welcome our guest who had a powerful near-death experience, recalls leaving his body, entering higher realms. Life review, visions of the past and future. Welcome to The Returned.
You die and your soul leaves your body, goes back home to heaven. No, that's not the way it is. You're always there.
Hi, and welcome to The Returned. Today we are joined by a very special guest, Brianna Lafferty, a spiritual healer, doula, and author, whose life was forever changed by a profound near-death experience in 2017. That event became the catalyst for a deep unraveling and awakening, leading her to explore the intersection between trauma, healing, and what she calls quantum consciousness. Thank you, Brianna, for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Before we get into the NDE, I would really like to give the audience an idea and a sense of who you are. So basically who you were before this profound near-death experience.
For my experience, I was kind of raised in your typical suburban household. We went to church. I went to school. We never lacked for anything. And I lived a pretty great childhood, I feel. My grandparents were amazing, got me into all sorts of cool activities. Going to church should have felt like home, but it never did. And then around age 10, I started coming down with these really weird physical happenings. So it would start with my arms started twitching. And it would do this weird flutter, and I had longer hair than this, and I would just play it off by, oh, I'm playing with my hair. Then my arms and my calves just started to cramp and hurt all the time. So I'd wrap them with ace bandages, and we thought maybe I'd be tall like my dad, and FYI, I'm not. So, it was just we didn't think too much about it until then the twitching started happening on the other side, my other arm. And then I started tremoring, full body tremors. And when they'd happen, my family thought I was cold, and because it looked like I was just shivering. And they'd try to throw jackets and blankets on me. I'm like, no, I'm burning up. Please don't. And then more things started to twitch. My legs started to twitch, my head. And I think we started finally seeing doctors around 14 because it was progressing. And the muscle pain was also progressing. And the first doctor we saw, it wasn't until I wrote a book with my mom about the whole Myoclonus Dystonia journey, which is the condition I was later diagnosed with, about this. But the first doctor was so close to knowing what I had. But he wanted to put me on it can be a very dangerous medication, even though he's leaving practice and he didn't tell us. So instantly broke our trust. And so then we go on, this hunt for a doctor who was trustworthy. It would take until I was age 18 as this condition's progressing with nerve pain, insomnia, OCD, depression, anxiety, as well as the twitching fits got worse. I started having non-epileptic myoclonic seizures, and it would take until I was 18 to get a diagnosis. And when I was diagnosed, it was so rare that they had just heard about it. No one in the clinic had seen it. It's a pretty big one, I think, in the US in general, but definitely in Colorado, the Anschutz Center. And so they were kind of like, well, we've tried everything already. You're kind of on your own. We don't know what to do. And so I just continued to try to live my life. I graduated high school early. I really didn't like school, and so I wanted to get done with it as soon as possible instead of dropping out and having to go back. I just was like, I'm getting this over with. Then I went to college. I bought my first house at age 19. It was a remodel. Well, I was the one remodeling it, and, just tried really hard not to let this affect my life. Early on, the doctor said, well, if you have this myoclonic fit, you can't go skiing, which my family loved to do because you might twitch and fall off the chairlift. You can't ride a motorcycle or drive because you might twitch and crash. You can't rock climb, which I love to rock climb, and because you might twitch and fall off the wall. You can't go swimming because you might have this episode and drown. And they basically told me I couldn't live in order not to die. And that was not me. I said, well, you know what? If it kills me, at least I'll go out doing what I love. Mm-hmm. And another interesting thing is around the age of 15, I just had this inherent knowing that I was going to die before I turned 28. And I shared this with my mom, and she took me very seriously. And it kind of made sense because my condition was continuing to progress. No one had a prognosis, and we really didn't know, what was coming next. I also had some other conditions alongside it. And in my early teenage years, I also started seeing auras and ghosts and metaphysical things and inanimate objects move. And my church said, either you don't see it or it's of the devil and your heart isn't good. And my church, also kept saying, if you pray hard enough, if you believe hard enough, if you have enough faith, God will heal you. So imagine what that did to my poor psyche when I wasn't healed. I thought I believed really strong. I thought I had all this faith, and I'd pray and we'd have prayer circles and prayer chains, and just nothing got better. It always just kept getting worse. And so I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Then I became, very guilty. And I became very angry. Like, I didn't do anything. Like, why me? I went through all the emotions of grief, basically, sometimes all at once even. And so I didn't really know where my relationship with God or the creator source stood, because the one I was taught about and the things I was taught, they weren't happening for me. And I was seeing and experiencing things that my church said, no, you're not. Or if you are, it's of the devil and, all this stuff. So just, it was psyche hit after psyche hit. And then doctors, before I was diagnosed, had misdiagnoses. Some said it was in my head. So, here I am. Being a teenager is hard as it is. And then I'm getting medical professionals telling me that I'm crazy, and my church saying I'm awful and a sinner, basically, and I don't have faith and I'm going to go to hell. And that was kind of my early childhood. So I stopped going to the church at 16, and I was able to sell my house. I had remodeled it. I finished college, and I was exhausted. When I say insomnia, I mean 2, 3, 4 days with zero sleep. Not a cat nap, not 10 minutes, not a rough night, not, I only got a couple hours. It was 0 hours for days. And so I'm exhausted, and I sell my house and do pretty well. And originally, my plan was to use that equity and buy a nicer house and, keep working up the chain and flipping them. But I am exhausted at this point. So I take my proceeds and I basically run away to die. I moved 1,400 miles away to Texas from Colorado and found a beautiful apartment in the hill country of Texas. I think there's not too many beautiful places in Texas, but the hill country is very gorgeous and green. So I moved there, and, I tried still to live my best life. I'd go out and explore. I'd explore towns around. I went spelunking, cave diving, and, exploring the botanical gardens and the river walk. And, I didn't stop living, even though I'd gotten to die. I just didn't know how I was going to die. So that brings us to April 2017. And my myoclonus dystonia is, it's a all day, everyday battle. And then the insomnia doesn't help. Your body's exhausted if you can't sleep. And here it's been 15 years since I'd really slept. And the insomnia was also progressing. It was getting worse. I'd spend more and more days without sleep. Then I come down with the flu. And I was like, well, it's just the flu. I've had the flu before. I've had a cold before. I'll get through it. And it was so bad. I couldn't hold anything down. I was basically married to the bathroom, couldn't keep food or fluid down. But doctors had been so dismissive of me my whole life. I was like, I'll deal with it. It's a flu. They can't do anything anyway. My parents had known something was, because I was still in contact with, my family and everything, on a daily basis. And I'm getting sicker and sicker, and my dad has heard the voice of God that I'm under attack. And so my parents know I'm getting sicker, I'm getting iller, and they book a flight. But they can't get there for a couple days. The soonest flight they can get is in a couple days. So I'm on the phone with my mom, and we're praying because, I didn't necessarily lose my faith. I just didn't know what it was. So we're praying and trying, and this had gone on for a few days, and my mom had been up with me, and she's not someone who can function without sleep, where I learned how to function and adapt without sleep. So at 2 a.m. on April 27th, 2017, I told her I was going to try to get some sleep, and I told her that so that she could hopefully get some sleep. And I hung up the phone, and that is when I realized how extremely exhausted I was. Exhausted mentally, exhausted emotionally, obviously exhausted physically, and I didn't even know, but I was also exhausted spiritually. And so every part of that cried out. And I wasn't sure who I was crying out to, but I knew that I had no more fight in me. I'd been fighting for 15 years and I had no more. I was done. So from the very essence of me, I called out and I said, I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands. And I meant that. I didn't, they always say surrender, surrender, surrender. I didn't know what true surrender was until that moment because I had literally given up. That was my surrender. And as soon as that happened, an immense wave of peace just washed over me. It was like stadiums had been silenced and huge boulders had been lifted off of me. It's like I was saved from the drowning in the depths of the ocean. It was just so serene and peaceful. And after that happened, I heard this really loud booming voice, but it wasn't really external, it wasn't internal, it was just ever present. And it said, "Are you ready?" I didn't even hesitate to ponder what I was ready for. I just said yes. And just like that is when I felt these massive pounds on my chest. And that is when my heart stopped and I was completely disconnected from my body. So when I disconnect from my body, I don't, float above and kind of do this ascension thing. I'm just completely separated. I don't remember Brie. I don't remember Brianna. I don't remember humanity. I don't remember Earth. I am just energy in this beautiful blackness. And in this blackness, it is absolutely everything. It is every possibility, is every beginning. It is everything, absolutely everything. And also in this blackness, is the creator, is God, is the one who answered my call. And it was just pure love. And I knew I was home. And I can't even describe the type of love that I felt. It was just no judgment, no anger, no hate. I didn't have any life review. It was just welcome home. And even though I was unaware of Brianna or humanity or Earth, my consciousness knew something drastic had shifted. And so I had the thought, why am I dead? And when I had that thought, 3 monks appear out of the blackness and they just kind of float on by, like kind of laughing at me, just a grinning, kind of laughing. And I didn't feel, judged or anything. I just thought, okay, that's curious, and it's like, okay. And then they, went back into the darkness. Well, it would take me 5 years after this experience to know why they were kind of laughing, because I asked, am I dead? And death is not a thing. How could I be something that does not exist? So that's why they were kind of laughing, right? Because they're like, yeah, that's not real. You're silly. And when they go back into the blackness, I end up in this beautiful, bright blue white tunnel. Just the most amazing blue that I've ever seen. And there's also a ton of binary code that's in around this tunnel. And as I'm going through it, I'm still just energy. I'm getting downloaded with some of this code, and I don't know what information is in it. I just know it's important. It'll come to me when I need it. And it was just super, super cool. I then end up it's basically kind of the opposite of this blackness. It was all white. Just everything was white. There was no windows or doors or walls or floors or anything. And in front of me, the only time I had a human body in this whole experience, and there's a pile of black numbers in front of me, huge numbers. And behind me is an ascended master teacher. And I don't know which one, I don't know who, but in front of me, I pick up these numbers, and with childlike enthusiasm, I throw them up in the air and say, no wonder you love creating, because I was told that the universe was created in math, and I was not a math nerd. So that still is so interesting to me that I was so excited that the universe was created in math, because math isn't my, necessarily my thing. Maybe it was just the fact I was so excited to know that kind of knowledge. But right after that, I transitioned into the place I would spend the majority of my NDE experience. And this place had a ton of other beings, but none of them looked human. I had no idea if they had been human, if they're where they came from, where they had been, none of that. We were just all souls in this place. And it was reminiscent of Earth. There were buildings and streets and trees and utility poles. And I remember at the beginning of being here, I saw some beings sliding down snow-covered trees. I'm like, oh, that looks like so much fun. But I don't think I like snow. Then all of a sudden, the trees are covered in moss. I'm sliding down them. And I was like, oh, what if, because I don't like snow, I get to see this green moss tree, and I'm sliding down these green trees, but they like snow, and they're sliding down the snow trees, but we're doing this together, living these different experiences together simultaneously. I was like, so cool. I just thought everything was so cool in this experience. There were some other points where I was helping stock the shelves of this like grocery store with these other beings, and no one ever said a word. There isn't even like telepathic communication, but any question or thought I had happened immediately. So there was another point where these beings were working on a machine with a huge flame out of it. And I just thought, what happens if I get too close? Will I melt? Well, instantaneously, I am under the flame and I am melted. But there's no pain, there's no fear. It's just like, curious. I wonder if anyone will put me back together. And sure enough, a few beings come back and put me back together. And we carry on. And
unbelievable.
Yeah, it was just like my thoughts created the reality instantly. Whenever I had a question, like, oh, what if? Or I don't think I like snow. Change. Would I melt? Yes, just like instantaneous happening. And it was really interesting because me and these other beings didn't communicate. And yet, when I asked if they'd put me back together, they put me back together, when I just had that thought. There's a point where we all danced in unison as if we'd practiced for millennia. And it was just really interesting, the wholeness and connectedness of everyone. And this part goes on for a ridiculous amount of time, so I'm giving the highlights. I think the last two highlights is when I was trying to learn to fly. I was terrible at it, and one of the utility poles I mentioned, I severed my arm. Once again, no pain, no fear, none of these human-like emotions, and I just thought, I wonder what's gonna happen. And I saw binary code kind of heal it back together, and I was like, cool. It just kept going. Like,
what?
It was the most...
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was just, nothing but curiosity basically in this place I was in. And at the end of this part of my experience, there was a fence, and it was a barbed wire fence, but you couldn't see beyond it, or I couldn't see beyond it. It was all blurry and, fuzzy. There's an opening, and some of the beings were starting to go through it, and I was never asked if I wanted to go. I knew that I couldn't go with them, even though I knew that beyond was somewhere greater. I wasn't given a choice. I wasn't, I just knew beyond was somewhere even more amazing. And kind of after I had that realization I couldn't go with them, I end up in the last part of my experience, which is in this tiny, it felt like a tiny room, but with 7 amazing, magnificent beings behind me. I never saw them, but I could just feel them. And in front of me was this huge scroll, like it was as big as I was. And then I start to see this sparkly golden script being written on it. And for some reason, out of nowhere, I finally remembered that I had come from being a human. And so my human ego showed back up and said, you're showing this to a human, because it was like some amazing information. And they're like, never mind. The script went away, the scroll rolled up, and that's when I got snapped back into my body. And it was weird feeling my heart stop, but very much weirder to feel it start again.
Unbelievable. My goodness. Bree, like, wow.
Yeah, so that is the NDE part of my, kind of the lead up and, how I got to my NDE. It was basically 15 years in the making, if not, 25, because, I'm pretty sure I put it in my path to explore. So, it could have been 25 years in the making. When I realize I'm back in my body, I basically have a panic attack because I want to go back, and I feel like I've been gone from my body for months. So I close, I keep my eyes closed. I don't open them. I try deep breathing. I try meditating. I try self-hypnosis. I try begging to go back. I try resurrendering. I try everything to go back because I did not want to be back in my body. And then the panic sets in because I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been gone for months. There's no way, like, I'm not in a coffin. Because I've got to be in a body, even though I wanted to be cremated. I've got to be in a body if I'm back in a body. Oh my gosh, my parents were so heartbroken. They couldn't cremate me, and they just buried me. And now I'm in a coffin. Now I'm gonna die because I can't get out of a coffin. And I like have this anxiety attack. And then I finally have to open my eyes, and so I look at my phone, and it says 2:08. So I think, okay, 2:08. And I'm still in my same bed. I'm like, okay, so is it a couple weeks from now? Where are my parents? From the last time I remember being in my body. Is it a couple weeks from then? No. And then I look at, has it been a couple days? Once again, where are my parents? And then I look at the date and I'm like, there's no way. It was only 8 minutes. And I could have sworn I had been gone for months. So that was kind of really hard to like process and understand.
It sounds like it's like that you were in like a realm that seemed real, like more real than here almost.
Absolutely. It definitely felt more real than here.
And when you were there doing all this fun stuff, which I think is really cool, did anybody tell you what you were there for?
Nope.
No.
The monks just smiled when I asked if I was dead. The other beings, I think, were kind of in the same boat I was, just we were all kind of in this place. And, looking back, it kind of feels like maybe a holding place, or a in between, so if you look at the realms, I know some people have had hellish experiences, and, that's going to be a low frequency, low energy realm. And then there's, what people would consider heaven, or all the different types of heavens that are throughout cultures and religions and philosophies. I think that's a very high frequency, high energy realm. But I think I was somewhere in between, and I think there's many in between, because I also involuntarily astro traveled in my early 20s, and I'd be stuck in between Earth and this hellish realm, and I'd encounter all these horrific demonic entity beings. So I think there are so many different realms and, kind of levels and frequencies. And that's also why I think the beings who were with me that were able to go through that fence, they were just moving on to a higher frequency realm.
Yeah. And who do you think the loud voice was?
So definitely Source, the creator, God, whatever you want to call it. The energy that saved me. That's absolutely what the voice was.
That black space that you went to, I also went to. In my NDE. I know what that exactly feels like in that space. Yeah, I never went beyond that, but I know exactly what it is like to be in that black space.
Well, and it's really interesting.
So interesting.
Well, because, here in our human minds, you think of blackness as scary or empty or, something like that. But it was the exact opposite. It was full and loving and amazing. So I find that to be such an interesting contrast to what we imagine a blackness would be like.
Yeah, and what we're really taught. Like we're kind of taught that that's scary.
Yeah.
Like being in the dark is scary. I felt the exact same way. I didn't even know who I was. I didn't think about anybody. No one. It was when I came back, I also thought, what? What the heck? I didn't think of anybody. Like, wow, don't even know if I even had a body. Did you have a body? Did you see your body?
I did not see my body, and now that I've been able to get back to that black space through meditation, I definitely did not have a body. I was an energetic body, if that makes sense. So, like all my energy was together, but I didn't have anything that resembled a human or looked like this.
Isn't that interesting? So a lot of people say that NDEs are like the brain shutting down. How do you personally differentiate what you experienced from, say, a hallucination or a dream? And this is from a skeptic's point of view, just because there's always skeptics out there, right?
Yeah, of course. I've got a few, first off, I overcame my biggest critic, myself. Once I had to convince myself it was real. But now looking back, one, You don't have those intense dreams within 8 minutes. They have done enough studies to show how long it takes the brain to go through different stages of sleep to get to a dreamlike state. You cannot fall asleep. It was more real than REM. It was more intense and vivid than even my REM sleep dreams. Your brain does not go through that in 8 minutes. So it's not a dream. Two, I've had hallucinations. I've had hallucinations because of the lack of sleep. I've had hallucinations due to medications. I've had hallucinations due to some other things. And they are very different because you don't know if it's real or not. You're very like, which part is real? Is it, this thing I'm seeing or something else? What is real? And there's no doubt in my mind that this was real. So that, because I've had hallucinations before, I can definitely distinguish between that and what happened. Another thing is I remember it's been 8.5 years and I remember everything crystal clear. But my favorite thing is go listen to Eben Alexander, because he was an atheistic brain neurosurgeon, and he knew all about the brain and the dying process, and his brain died. It was dead. And his experience when I finally heard his is what made me realize that mine was real too.
Me too.
He was was it even Evan?
Yes, he was him and Anita Morjani.
Okay. Yeah. Anita Morjani's didn't resonate with me so much, but definitely once I heard Eben Alexander's, it hit me in the gut. I was like, oh my gosh, because a lot of these other NDEers have, some themes in common. I'm like, well, mine doesn't sound like any of theirs until I heard Eben. And then I was like, okay. So for the people who are like, well, how do you know it wasn't just your brain dying? Well, go listen to the story of a guy whose brain was dead and, listen to his story.
I agree with you on that.
So those are kind of my answers.
Some people might wonder, why do only some people have NDEs and some other? Like, what's your take on that?
They are extremely traumatic. So I think just like some people have abuse, some people have sexual assault, some people have loved ones murdered or loved ones die early or lose children. We all have different traumas in our lives, but I think we also plan for a lot of these traumas before we come here. We've got these milestones we want to meet in order to learn and to grow. And an NDE is a very, very traumatic experience. A lot of people don't understand just everything. First off, the thing that leads up to your NDE, it's not just because you just die. It's usually because of something traumatic. And then the actual experience, isn't necessarily traumatic. It is for some people. But then coming back and reintegrating is a whole different traumatic set of experiences. For me, like, I felt like I was stuffed into sausage casing. Everything, I did. I was like, I can't get out.
Oh, goodness.
And then material, like walls freaked me out. I could hear plants and animals and people's thoughts and feelings. And I came back a medical intuitive, but that meant I felt things. Like if something was wrong with your knee, I felt it in my knee. So that was very overwhelming. And, it took a lot of time to process what happened, why it happened, what it's for, learning about these new things, learning about these old things. And it just completely blew up my religious upbringing, so there's that. And
I bet.
Yeah. So I definitely met what a lot of people would consider God, but definitely not the one I was taught in the Bible, especially in the first half where he's angry and judgmental and you're going to hell for eternity. Also, you can't go to hell for eternity because only humans have a time-based concept of life and death. And so once you're dead, there is no such thing as time, and eternity is a time-based thing. Therefore, it does not exist.
Right? So I can't agree with you more and resonate with you more.
Yeah, the reason, everyone has them is, one, there are easier, softer ways to awaken. If and only if that's even on your journey. Not everyone is meant to awaken. Some people are just here to, maybe it's their first time here, or maybe it's pretty early on for them and it's way too much, way too fast. Where other people, it's like, okay, you know what? I want to do this faster. I want to remember who I am. I want to help humanity. I want to do this, and this is what it's going to take. I'm extremely stubborn, and I think the universe tried to wake me up a few times, and I just kept... And so they're like, all right, we're shoving you off the cliff then.
Right?
We tried to give you gentle nudges, but you need to be shoved off the cliff.
So great. That is so great. I feel the same with me in my own life. It's like, wow, yeah, I get it. I get it. Wow. So, do you feel that you grew more after and had an understanding of your life more after the NDE?
Not right away, but eventually, yeah. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know why I had this NDE. I didn't know, you know, why I had this experience, or even if I did have this experience, to be honest, I went to IANS within the year. I got counseling from another NDEer, which helped, like make me realize I wasn't crazy, but I was still, battling myself. And it wasn't until I left my, um, corporate position, and that was, I think, 5 years later, that I started to explore the why. Like, okay, what was it about? Who am I? What do I do moving forward? And I really started doing things that fed my soul instead of feeding my ego. My job fed my ego. I was very good at my job. I was very well paid, and I was well wanted around the whole US. I was recruited by huge, huge companies all the time. And so that fed my ego, but it didn't feed my soul. So then I found a thing called a death doula. And I did volunteer. I've always been a huge person to volunteer. I love volunteering. I did volunteer for hospice a couple years after my NDE, for a couple years, just to be close to that space again and hold that authentic, excited energy without having to say anything. So that also helped me heal from this traumatic experience, is just getting to help other people. So then I found a thing called a death doula, and I could do more than volunteering, and I could start my own business. And then I found a lot of people actually needed more spiritual support than they did with active dying, especially where I live now. We have amazing hospice providers, but the questions I was getting and the support that my clients were needing were more on spiritual level. So then I'm like, okay, I'm a death and spiritual doula. I'm helping you transition through these major spiritual transformations as well. But there have been a lot of people hear my story who have been sick. And while I'm figuring out myself, while I'm trying to understand myself, I learn about Dr. Joe Dispenza. Again, my mom told me about him when I was younger, but I was in such survival. I was like, I don't care that he healed his back. We've tried all the natural. Reiki healed so-and-so, and this healed so-and-so, and Chinese herbs, and blah, 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 blah. We tried it all. And I was like, I'm in no mood to learn about this chiropractor who healed his own back. Until 4 years later, and I was like, okay, you know what? I don't really need to heal, even though I'm still struggling with myoclonus dystonia, but at this point I've had brain surgery for it. And the brain surgery has been really helpful. And I was like, okay, I'm going to use this time to work on some deeper parts of myself. So I got into Dr. Joe Dispenza to rewrite some programs I wrote out of survival, some, very unhealthy coping mechanisms. And that's what I got into Dr. Joe for. And I went to a retreat in Denver, and I'd never really known about this type of meditation. It was always like mindfulness, be fully in your senses, touch, taste, feel, see, hear, everything, just be fully immersed, or, quiet your mind, or, mantras and stuff like that. And I never resonated with any of those. And I really liked Dr. Joe because he talked about going to nowhere, with no place, no time, no body, and no thing. I was like, I've been there. I have been there. And I want to get there again. So on the second or third day of the retreat, well, before the retreat started, I was meditating in a park, and I got into the black space, and it was awesome. But then a couple days into the retreat, I get into the blackness again. And in front of me, I see my heart and my brain appear in front of me, and the binary codes start circulating. And I knew it was rewiring my brain. And so myoclonus dystonia, the condition I had at this point for 22 years at least, is a neurological movement disorder. So, it's all neurological in the head, in the brain. And so the binary code from my tunnel is just circulating, and it's coming from source, and it's going to my heart, and I'm just blowing it up with love and gratitude, and it's just circulating. And when I come back out of it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm healed. And so I had a deep brain stimulator put in. And any tiny little adjustment to it, I would either start twitching or cramping, or I could tell within a minute. And I was like, and I have a little controller that I can change settings as needed, and meaning I can also turn it off. And the next day, because it was late at that day, and I'm like, I'm not turning it off and going into a fit and then not sleeping. So I waited till the next morning and I turned it off and I waited. And I mean, usually when I turned it off or down, I'd start twitching immediately. Like it was very apparent. Nothing happened. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes turned into hours, hours turned into days, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years. And here we are, still symptom free.
Do you think that that is a direct result of your NDE as well?
I think that's what I needed in order to have the knowledge how powerful we are within and where to go, like what this black space is. Had I not had that NDE, I'm not sure I would have been able to get there. But I'm not saying that other people can't, because I have seen incredible stories of people who have been able to heal themselves, and not even necessarily through Dr. Joe. I don't think there's one right or wrong way for anything ever. You know, I have seen incredible and heard incredible stories of people healing themselves. And I needed that for me to be like, okay, there's more than just this physical body. You are loved, you are taken care of, you know, it's temporary. The suffering that you're enduring in this physical life is not going to last forever. There's something amazing beyond. And your thoughts do still create reality. It just might take more time because you're in a different space, that it takes longer for that thought frequency to turn into matter and to turn into reality. But it's also a blessing, because how negative are we as humans? How many awful intrusive thoughts do we get? Like, how lucky are we that they don't just happen? Because we do have pain. We do have fear. We do have bodies that can be, you know, damaged irreversibly. Where in my NDE, there was no pain, there was no fear. Everything, you know, got put back together just fine. So it's a blessing that we get that time to kind of, you know, change our thoughts and change our reality.
Yeah, when I think now about that, and you were going through your NDE and you were doing these weird things, you were melted, your arm was severed off. Isn't that kind of like showing you what your body could actually do in a different way? Obviously, you're in a different realm that reacts differently. But to me, it immediately made me think, hey, maybe it's almost like a metaphor to show you that you can actually heal yourself.
Yeah, 100%. Especially because I healed so many times, you know, one with help of others, one with just the binary code. And then it actually happened in real life. So I don't think there's anyone that could not heal themselves. But there are also caveats that maybe they're not supposed to. They didn't put that in their plan. People who are trying and still end up passing. I think that's maybe more of a lesson for the people, the souls that came in with them, you know? So it's kind of hard, but I strongly believe that if you're looking for, you know, an answer, you're going to find it. Search within yourself. If you stop giving it away out here and letting other people no one's going to heal you, but you can heal yourself.
I 100% agree with that. Wow. I want to kind of circle back up to the top when you were actually first coming out of your body, when you've got the 3 knocks on the chest and the booming voice, because I know the listeners out there would definitely want to know, were you in pain when this happened?
I was in pain until I surrendered. Once I surrendered, every ounce of pain left my body. So the pain, the pressure, the dystonia, the OCD, the anxiety, the racing thoughts, all of that. So when I felt the 3 really hard pounds, they did not hurt. It was really a lot of pressure.
And did you hear anything when it happened?
Nope, just that voice, Are you ready? And I said yes, and 3 hard pounds, and
You had your bags packed. You were ready.
Oh, yeah.
Weren't you?
I was gone.
You're like, I'm out of here.
I did not know there was a return ticket.
That should have been told to you in the beginning, right?
Right.
When they asked you if you were ready, because you're like, oh yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm not coming back. Peace
I'm ready.
out.
I'm ready. Oh, okay, but you do have a return ticket. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Can we change this?
Yeah. So do you believe that we all sign up, or do we all have these contracts?
Yeah.
That we come to Earth, and some of us maybe some of us weren't doing what we were supposed to be doing, and we got a little, wake up,
Oh
time to
yeah.
like get on with it.
I wasn't doing what I was doing, and that's why they shoved me off a cliff. They tried nudging me. They tried, and finally they just had to shove me and say, "All right, wake up. We're done playing it easy." But so this comes up a lot too. If we put these things in our path, like these tragedies, these losses, these illnesses, these NDEs, anything, where does free will come in? If we've already planned these and we're going to experience them, where does free will come in? So I like to cover it when this question comes up, because it always comes up in the comments. It's like if you're traveling from, let's say, well, for me, I'm in the US, so I usually use California to Florida, but you can go East Canada to West Canada, or heck, you could even go Canada to Australia. Okay, you've got
Right.
two landmarks. Those are the things you have put in your life. You're going to experience them. But how you get there is completely up to you. Are you going to walk? Are you going to run? Are you going to ride a bike? Are you going to ride a motorcycle? Are you going to drive a car, a truck, a semi? Are you going to fly? Is it going to be a commercial plane? Is it going to be private? Is it going to be a two-seater? Are you going to take a boat and circumnavigate? And what kind of boat? Is it going to be a sailboat? A cruise? A dinghy? Are you going to swim? I mean, there's so many different ways you can get there, and that's where your free will comes in. But you put these these milestones for your soul to grow, for your soul and those that you come here with, your soul clusters, your soul family. So, but how you get there and where you go from there, that's completely up to you. That's your free will.
For those watching that still aren't convinced, because there's always that, right? They're also facing fear. What would you say to them about that?
Well, I'm not really here to convince anybody or change anybody's mind. I'm just here to share my story and my experience. And if it resonates with you, then that's what it's here for. And if it doesn't, there's obviously a reason you're listening. So there's obviously some curiosity out there. And it might just take that one story, because I heard dozens of NDEs before I heard Eben Alexander's 2 years later after an IONS conference. I missed him by a day, and none of them sounded like mine. And so maybe it's just that one story that's out there. Keep listening, and that story will reach you when it's meant to. I think I wasn't ready to hear that Eben's story. That's why it didn't happen in 2018. It took till 2020. I think that was also placed in the time that I needed it to be placed. I think it was too soon before.
The beings that you've seen on the other side there, what did they look like?
There's the big, huge beings that I didn't see that were really powerful, but the other beings, I still have a really hard time describing them. Kind of like, not necessarily, if you mixed like claymation with Russian nesting dolls, maybe that kind of gets close. It's really hard to describe. So because I got the feeling that not all of them had been human, I think they were from different dimensions, different worlds, different planets. Some of them may have been human like I was. We had just kind of all met back in this place. But, to outwardly say alien, I probably wouldn't, just because I think there is so much out there that, we think it's crazy just to think about aliens being on other planets, solar system or our universe. Well, when you realize that there's a ton of universes and ton of dimensions, what do you call those? Do you still call those aliens? I don't know.
Aren't we all aliens, though?
Aren't we all? We're all
we
visitors.
would be, kind of, right? We're all visitors here, right?
Yeah.
What did you feel was the best part of your ND?
I mean, I like so many different parts for different reasons. I mean, the tunnel was just like so incredible. Learning the universe was created in math in the white space was just, I was so enthusiastic. Playing in the Earth-like realm was just, that's what I did. I just played. It was pure curiosity and joy. But I will say my favorite part was the blackness, because the amount of love and the expansiveness I was, and knowing that any possibility and all energy started there and starts there, especially now that I know how to get back there anytime I want through meditation. It's just, that is beyond indescribable for me, like beyond my favorite. Even though it was just blackness, it was everything and is everything.
I know. I was there too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I so
Even if you didn't have the
understand.
other ones, like that's out
Yeah,
of all the fun stuff I did, that's still my favorite part, just
it
because.
was an incredible feeling. I
Yeah,
got
that is
goosebumps
why.
even thinking about it. I didn't know you could get back there though, so I definitely want to talk to you about how I can try to get back there after.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't
Definitely.
know I could get back there either until I started listening to Dr. Joe and what he was talking about. And I was like,
Mm.
has he had an NDE? Turns out he has not, but he's fascinated by them. And he's found this
Ah,
place on his own, meaning you do not need to have an NDE
that's
to
right.
find this place. That is my favorite part about it.
If you had a chance to say one thing to the heart of humanity related from your NDE experience, what would you say to them?
That we're all in this together, that we are all one, and not come off religious zealot or anything like that, because a lot of texts say that we're all one and to treat another like you want to be treated. But how deep that actually goes in the fact that we all are really connected and are all one, like I think that's huge.
Did you have something that made you feel we were all one? Was there a message? Was there a feeling of something?
Well, between the blackness with all the energy, the NDE, and then of course just how connected everyone was in the earth-like realm, with I just had a thought like, will someone help me? And instantly people are helping me. And we like we moved as one, and we danced as one, and we worked as one. I really think that was a huge sign that we here are one. And now knowing things, especially on the Dr. Joe end or other healers ends, and then people who can astro travel and astro project, like we are all just energy, and we can feel each other's energy. I mean, heck, you can tell if someone's anxious in the room next to you. You can tell if they're sad, if they're happy, without them saying anything, because we are energy, and our energy extends beyond this physical self. So you just take that on a much grander scale and understand that we are all energy commingling, and all of that is huge. And then learning that you can meet other people in other dimensions. So my fiance and I actually astro traveled together, and we ended up in the same dimension together, and that's just blew my mind even more. It's just like, yes, we are all connected, and we are just souls.
That is incredible. That's a whole nother story. My
Yeah, that
goodness.
just happened pretty recently.
Do you ever get afraid of
Not anymore.
dying?
No.
No.
And when I was before my NDE, I was never afraid of death. I was afraid of life. Life hurt. I was in constant pain. I had constant anxiety. I chose really terrible guys because I didn't view my worth. I didn't have self worth. I didn't have self love. And because I didn't love myself, the guys I chose and chose me were very, they liked that I had no self. And so everything before my NDE, there's no way I would come back, because all I knew was pain and tragedy and trauma, and it wasn't something I wanted to come back to. So I was more scared of living than I was of dying, to be honest. Like, I thought about death a lot beforehand, and now that I've come back, definitely not scared of death, 100,000%. But now here's the big change: is I'm no longer scared of life.
Did your experience change your core beliefs about life?
Yeah, I would say so. Early beliefs were what I was taught, what I was raised in, what my culture told me, what my religion told me, what my schools told me. You work hard, you become successful, and you have a family, and this is what you do. This is how you live a happy whole life. Especially when I was in the church, it's you have a Christian family, you go to school, you get a career, you have a family, all of this. And it completely shattered that once I left corporate America and grieved about it for a month, and then started diving into what my actual purpose here was for, and what the NDE was all about, and why the heck I experienced all the things I experienced, and completely shifted. It's like I also came back like not caring so much about money. Like, I was making really good money, and it's like, now I'll make enough to live on, and have fun, but it's not the priority anymore. Now the priority is living in the now, not worrying about the future or dwelling on the past, and it's helping others realize the power they have within them. And yeah, it has nothing to do with climbing any more ladders or having this ideal what society or culture or even my dad's religion says I need to have as far as family, as far as job and life. And my dad's like, why? And my sister too, she's like, why don't you want to buy a house? Like, you have no interest in real estate anymore. And I did. I was like, because I just don't care. I don't want to be tied down. I want to travel the world. I want to see things. I want to help people. I want to be free. I want to be as free as I can here as I was over there.
So tell us what you're doing now. Where did it take you? Where did this NDE and how did it push you forward in your life?
Yeah, so right now I am a transitional guide. So I help with major transitions. So anything from spiritual awakenings, that could be near death, out of bodies, or any kind of major spiritual transformation or awakening, active or dying in general, and everything kind of encompasses that. I specialize in grief, and not just grief in death, but grief in any kind of loss. So loss of health, loss of job, loss of relationship, of course, loss of loved ones too. That's really where I specialize. And just telling my story and helping people realize that we are in this together and no one is alone. And we are powerful.
And none of us are getting out of here alive, are we?
I don't want to get out of here alive.
I know we sit and laugh about it like it's like, oh, it's nothing.
Yeah, and a lot of people who come from Catholicism who've been, literally told their whole life they're going to hell, basically, and there's nothing they could do about it. And so I've had a few people come to me for healing themselves. And what I find most fascinating is when they find their spiritually authentic self, their body starts to heal. And it's really cool to see.
What's next on the list for you now? Can you tell us about your books too?
Yeah. So my first book that I was like, okay, I guess I got to write about this is White Flame.
Could you tell us how you got to that as well?
Oh, yeah.
I love that story.
So when I said goodbye to corporate America and this amazing job offer that I'd been given, it was a few months after brain surgery, and my body wasn't ready for it. And I said goodbye. And I'm like, if I'm saying goodbye to this, I'm saying goodbye to my career. Like, what's the point of even having a career if I say goodbye to this? And then I grieved for a month and freaked out and was like, what the heck did I just do? And so I meditated. I did some self-hypnosis, and I got to a place somewhere in between here and where I was. And I realized I could ask questions, and I would ask, did I make the right decision? Did I go wrong? And I keep going down these like cobblestone paths, and then it'd get dark. It's like, okay, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to host a podcast? And that got dark. Am I supposed to do YouTube? That got dark. So those were no's. Was I supposed to take that job? That went dark. And finally, am I supposed to go to Western Colorado? And it lit up. And there's these beautiful mountains and sunshine and all this stuff. So I go down there. Like, okay, what the heck am I supposed to do there, though? And there's a river, and they start throwing books in the river, and they're stepping stones. And I was like, I need to write books. I'm not a writer. I don't want to write books. I came out of that, and I'm like, all right, well, we'll give it a shot. So I wrote my first book, White Flame, and it's more about the paranormal, metaphysical experiences that led up to my NDE. Because at this time, I thought it was still in this paranormal field. I didn't connect my condition and the NDE. Then the second book, my mom, it was a year after I had brain surgery, and I was doing better. Not perfect, but better. My mom and I wrote a book together on our journey with myoclonus dystonia, and that's called Wired to be Dysfunctional. And it starts off when I'm 10 up until I be 1, I think. And she tells her part as a mother, as an advocate, as a caregiver, and then I tell my part as a child, as a sick person, what she goes through, what I go through. So you get her side and my sides along.
That sounds
the
interesting.
journey. Yeah. So it's more medically heavy. It's more for people who are suffering with chronic illness or caregiving or advocating for somebody with chronic illness, especially if it's one of the more rare ones. So we wrote that for more of the medical community or chronic illness people. The third one is Leads to Nowhere. And that is when I finally realized my condition and my NDE and all the paranormal stuff, they were all hugely, immensely part of this journey. Like, they were absolutely necessary to become who I needed to be. And it is written after I healed from myoclonus dystonia through meditation and turned off my deep brain stimulator. And someone asked me if I was going to get it removed. I'm like, I'm not going to have another brain surgery to remove the wires that are in my head, but I might remove the battery and computer in my chest. And they said, so the leads are just going to go nowhere? Not only that, but nowhere is where I healed, in that darkness, in that blackness, where there's nowhere, no time, nothing, nobody, no place. So I was like, oh, this is a perfect name for my book. Then I thought I was done.
It.
Yeah, I totally thought I was done. Well, then I had a death doula client that had a amazing spiritual awakening in his life. He went from like this very logical, in the box kind of engineer into this huge spiritual, out there kind of guy. And he didn't want to write his own book. So he asked me to write his book because I was a writer and a death doula, so I was able to write his book as a legacy project, and he wanted it for the spiritual community to show others that they're not alone. So that is Awakening the True Self, Alan Jones's Spiritual Odyssey. And then I thought I was done, but just last month, I think. Yeah, we're still in July. Okay. Yeah, last month, I released a book with Dr. George Ackerman, and he asked me to co-author a book with him about grief, especially because I'm a grief specialist and a death doula. And I have had myoclonus dystonia, which is closely related to Parkinson's. And his mother passed from Parkinson's about 5 years ago, and he's still grieving. And so he wanted my input to come in and help write this book with him. And so it is From Pain to Purpose, and it's all about turning your grief and your traumas into a purpose and helping, either not necessarily even helping others. If that's your purpose, that's your purpose, but turning your pain into purpose. And then I also cover how different cultures view grief, and grief of death, grief of different types of loss. Like I talked about, not necessarily, you can grieve about anything. You can grieve about your loss of job. I grieved about saying goodbye to corporate America. I grieved about losing my childhood, my young adult life. I grieved the person I thought I would be without this illness. And so there are so many different types of grief. So I also touch on the different types of grief, compounding grief, and how different cultures view grief.
You're a talented and busy woman, aren't you?
I'm definitely busy, and I have been blessed with some skills that are great to help other people with.
I can't say enough. So thank you for helping so many people.
Yeah, well,
not very many people get that.
Well, they tell me I help, and it's just incredible to, like you said before we started this, you're a mirror. And that's basically a lot of what I am too. And being able to show the power within somebody else is so absolutely fulfilling in my soul.
That is absolutely gorgeous. And we are going to put all your links to everything, all your contact information in the description box below. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our guest today?
Just if you're here and you're listening, you're meant to be here, and I hope you found the message you were looking for.
Thank you so much, Brianna, for sharing not only your story, but your heart, the wisdom that's come from walking through both pain and light. Your journey reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is a deeper truth unfolding, one that calls us back to ourselves and perhaps even beyond ourselves. So for those listening, may this conversation be a mirror, a gentle nudge to trust the unknown, to soften into your own process, and to remember that sometimes what feels like a road to nowhere, actually a path to something more. Thank you again, Brianna, for you being here with us on The Returned.
Thank you so much for having me.